gouged for oil, gas, metals, and minerals. The seas that once fed us are now often polluted and overfished. Even the air we breathe carries the heavy metals and toxins of our industry as the byproduct of runaway greed. Let us choose now to reverence the earth with sacrificial concern for the generations who may follow us and respect for the needs of one another, that we may live in harmony with the planet and the whole of humanity. Amen.
God bless the grass that grows through the crack. They roll the concrete o'er it and try to keep it back. The concrete gets tired of what it has to do. It breaks and it buckles and the grass grows through. And God bless the grass. God bless the grass that breaks through the cement. It's green and it's tender and easily bent. But after a while it lifts up its head, for the grass is living and the stone is dead. And God bless the grass. God bless the grass that's gentle and low. Its roots are deep and its will is to grow. And God bless the truth, the friend of the poor, and the wild grass growing at the poor man's door. And God bless the grass.
If it isn't ironic to say Happy Easter on a day when we're all still socially isolating from one another, 500,000 Americans have tested positive, possibly meaning there's more than 5 million Americans who currently have COVID-19. We've counted 20,000 deaths and anticipating at least 40,000 more. So on this day when churches are empty and we're talking about Easter resurrection, we look forward to a world where we survive the challenges of a pandemic and can love each other through it and find a new way of being. Churches of all stripes are empty today. We're all trying to survive online. I encourage you to support us if you can. If you've still got a job, if you've still got an income, to remember that our expenses are approximately the same when the building is empty and when it is full. So if you would help us to stay online with your support, we will be forever grateful.
What were you doing when you were 16? Maybe mowing the lawn or in the social scene. Just starting an inkling of what you will be. Exploring but still not finding the key. Then there's Greta, the youth of today, crossing the ocean in a way that is green, to come here to save us but keeping it clean. A Swedish tornado with so much to say. Our climate's in crisis, we're in the last days. She's our canary in the coal mine. She may be a time traveler from 1898, an autistic robot to respond to just with hate. She warns our carbon footprint is past need for debate, pointing out there's not enough correction on our slate. So if you admire her for that which she stands, we've got to take action, not just sit on our hands, adopting the changes that come with her plans to stop Mother Earth from being damaged by man. Go with Greta, the young have a plan. She may be a time traveler from 1898, an autistic robot to respond to just with hate. She warns our carbon footprint is past need for debate, pointing out there's not enough correction on our slate. So if you admire her for that which she stands, we've got to take action, not just sit on our hands, adopting the changes that come with her plans to stop Mother Earth from being damaged by man. Go with Greta, the youth have a plan.
The wisdom lesson for today: responding to the Trump administration's relaxing of the EPA regulations, Brett Hartle, Government Affairs Director at the Center for Biological Diversity, said in a statement, "This sickening gift to polluters will allow wetlands, streams, and rivers across a vast stretch of America to be obliterated with pollution. People and wildlife need clean water to thrive. Destroying half of our nation's streams and wetlands will be one of Trump's ugliest legacies."
1, 2, 3, 4.
Whoa, oh, messy, messy me. Oh, things ain't what they used to be. No, no. Where did all the blue skies go? Poison in the wind that blows from the north and south and east. Whoa, messy, messy me. Oh, things ain't what they used to be. Oil wasted on the ocean and upon our seas. Fish full of mercury. Oh, Jesus, messy me. Oh, things ain't what they used to be. Radiation underground and in the sky. Animals and birds that live nearby. I die, yeah. Hey, messy, messy me. Oh, things ain't what they used to be. What about this overcrowded land? How much more abuse from man can she stay? The blue skies go, poison in the wind that blows from the north and south and east. Oh, messy, messy me. Oh, things ain't what they used to be. Oh, 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 messy. Oh, messy. Mercy me. Oh, 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 mercy, mercy me.
The craft of a stage magician is primarily distraction. The performer wants you to look over here so that you don't notice what he's doing over here. Our current president, this is going to sound a little bit like a compliment, and I don't mean it that way, but he is a master magician in how he manipulates the media and uses Twitter to constantly distract so that the news media is always following some outrage that he's starting while not noticing the substantive things that he's doing to accomplish his economic oligarchic goals. Now, I want to spell this out. I want to be very plain about this. If Donald Trump has a core belief, it is this, that the very wealthy should be allowed to soak up an ever larger percentage of the existing wealth of the nation. And he believes that that should be done, even if it means that you have to destroy the environment in the process, if you have to bankrupt our education system, or prevent tens of millions of Americans from gaining access to health care. For most of the past 3 years, Trump has created insane diversion through his own antics, but the arrival of the coronavirus, that has been a smokescreen that exceeds anything that he could have manufactured on his own. I would point out to you that once we had to close businesses and churches and casinos and bars, that the administration's failure to offer widespread virus testing is the reason why all those businesses had to close. If we had had some sense of who had the virus, where the hot spots were early in February, none of this would have been necessary. But because it became necessary, then the Congress was willing to almost immediately pass a $2.2 trillion stimulus bill. And that includes $1,200 to be paid to every individual in the country. Every individual in the country is incurring about $18,000 of national debt. And you're going to get less than 10% of that mailed to you. But what most people will notice is that they're getting a $1,200 check. And that is intended to keep you from noticing that $2 trillion are being given to corporations. And true to form for our Clementine Caligula, he immediately fired the official who had been selected to provide oversight for how those funds were used, Glenn Fine, because it was going to be Glenn Fine's job to make sure that these $2 trillion were distributed in a fair and equitable way to keep businesses open, to fuel and fund the economy. But Trump wanted to be sure that he has someone in that oversight position that will allow him not only to funnel federal dollars into Trump businesses and to Trump's political donors, but also to treat it in the same way that he has treated the medical supply reserve in sending medical supplies to states with governors who are supportive of him and robbing the states where the governor has been critical of him. And this package passed unanimously, but I want to remind you that in 2008, when President Obama recommended a stimulus package to help us to come out of the economic slump at that time, and it was less than half of this one, but it was forced to pass without a single Republican vote. So what makes the difference between the economic crisis of 2008 and the pandemic of 2020? I hope I'm not being paranoid to say it this way, but what makes the difference is the ability to steal $2 trillion from American taxpayers. I never would have dreamed that the United States would come to this low moral point, a point where we are somehow tolerating this level of criminal theft organized out of the Oval Office of the White House. But folks, we have arrived at a point where our government has the moral equivalence of a third world country. Even before the coronavirus lockdown, the Trump administration had rolled back over 100 EPA regulations regarding clean air, water, and how we dispose of waste, especially waste from coal mines and other mining industries. As dangerous as this pandemic is, and folks, this is no exaggeration, as dangerous as the pandemic is, these environmental regulation rollbacks, these regulations that have protected us from mercury in the water, from pollution in the air, from heavy metals in our food supply, these environmental rollbacks will kill many more people than the COVID-19 virus. And Trump is doing this on purpose for money. It couldn't be any more morally reprehensible. This kind of economic domestic terrorism, and it is that, but sadly it's not even unique to Donald Trump. We saw this 20 years ago in the buildup to the war in Iraq. The paranoid conspiracy theorists were trying to insist that George W. Bush had somehow planned the 9/11 attacks so that he would have an excuse to invade Iraq. That was obviously false. There was no one in the Bush administration that was smart enough to come up with a plan as complicated as that. However, they had already been trying to cook up an excuse to invade Iraq long before 9/11. So when that fateful day arrived, they used it as a convenient excuse in the same way that Trump is using the coronavirus as a convenient excuse. Just as the coronavirus wasn't cooked up in some military lab to use as a chemical weapon, nor, my evangelical friends, was it sent by God to punish people for being gay or for watching the Tiger King series or anything. Now, if I were God, you would have to watch out if you were watching the Tiger King thing. But God didn't do it. It was an event of nature, as pandemics always have been. It isn't 5G. It isn't any mysterious plan of any government. It just happens. It's just that Trump and the Tiger King make it seem so much worse. Today is Easter, and most of the online Easter sermons filling the internet will mostly take the gospel stories quite literally, promising that eternal life is yours because Jesus was bodily raised from the tomb. As you know, I take these accounts to be entirely metaphorical, as all academic theologians do. Almost like the ending of V is for Vendetta, when V reminds the tyrannical government officials who are about to kill him that they cannot kill an idea. The Roman government killed the historical Jesus, but they could not crucify his message. It took evangelical Christians to do that. The real message of the resurrection, the real point of it, so far as I'm concerned, is still the powerful awareness that you can kill a messenger, but you cannot kill a message. The EPA, which has been busy since the Nixon administration in trying to balance the interests of business and profit and employment and manufacturing with the need to protect the environment from lethal levels of pollution, has been effectively crucified in the Trump administration. But there are those who are praying for a resurrection. Just as Neil deGrasse Tyson is not the world's leading astrophysicist, but he is the world's leading spokesperson for astrophysics, the world's best-known environmental activist is not a scientist at all. She isn't even old enough to go to college yet, and she's been missing a whole lot of high school for the last few years. But in some ways, it's an act when the snarling, angry teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg addresses public gatherings. In real life, in interviews, she seems like she's a very sweet, charming, and astonishingly bright high school student. But she has become quite media savvy in her short career as a consciousness-raising public spokesperson for the earth. So she understands that in order to make a splash in the media, you have to give the cameras a perfect soundbite. But her real plan is not to become famous and to see those sound bites thrown up for a day in the 24-hour news cycle only to disappear. What Greta is asking us to do is for we adults in the room to start paying attention to the science. Now, we've all seen clips of her "How Dare You" speech that she delivered at the United Nations last September. She almost spit out the words, "This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. And yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction. And all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal growth. How dare you?" I was moved by that brief clip. And unless you've got a cold, hard place where your heart's supposed to be, you were too. But it was a bit of an act to get people to hear some of the hard data that appeared in the rest of her speech, much needed data that almost never made it into any news broadcast or even into print media. The day was that a famous speech would be run in its entirety in newspapers. Back in the 19th century, the entire text of the Lincoln-Douglas debates were run. Even 13 years ago, when I had a weekly column in the Springfield News Leader, I was allowed to write essays of 3,000 and 4,000 words in length. But our attention span has become so short, in large part because of our smartphones. Now when I write an article, it has to be 500 words. And people read the headlines and respond to that. What we really needed to hear was the rest of Greta's speech. I'm going to try to read part of it without the effect of her Swedish accent or even her long braided hair, although if we don't open barbershops pretty soon, I may be able to join her on that front. But I want to share with you a bit of the speech, and it's longer than a normal quote in a sermon, but I want you to hear what she was trying to get us to hear. She said, "For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you're doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight. You say you hear us, that you understand the urgency, but no matter how sad and angry I am, I do not want to believe that. Because if you really understood the situation and still kept failing to act, then you would be evil. And that I refuse to believe. The popular idea of cutting our emissions in half in 10 years only gives us a 50% chance of staying below a 1.5 degrees Celsius change in temperatures, and the risk of setting off irreversible chain reactions beyond human control. 50% may be acceptable to you, but those numbers do not include tipping points, most feedback loops, additional warming hidden by toxic air pollution, or the aspects of equity and climate justice. They also rely on my generation sucking hundreds of billions of tons of your CO2 out of the air with technologies that barely exist. So a 50% risk is simply not acceptable to us, we who have to live with those consequences. To have a 67% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees global temperature rise, the best odds given by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the world had 420 gigatons of CO2 left to emit back on January 1st of 2018. Today, that figure is already down to less than 350 gigatons. How dare you pretend that this can be solved with business as usual? and some technological solutions. With today's emission levels, that remaining CO2 budget will be entirely gone within 8.5 years. There will not be any solutions or plans presented in line with these figures here today because these numbers are too uncomfortable, and you are still not mature enough to tell it like it is. You are failing us, but the young people are starting to understand your betrayal. The eyes of all future generations are upon you, and if you choose to fail us, I say, we will never forgive you. We will not let you get away with this. Right here, right now, is where we draw the line. The world is waking up, and change is coming, whether you like it or not. Now, folks, I realize that was a lot of numbers, and that's why important information like that doesn't typically get into the media. It's a little too complicated to make a TV soundbite. But my favorite transplant to America, who manages to clearly tell us what's wrong with us in very plain language, John Oliver, boils down our environmental situation for us. He says, 1 in 4 Americans is skeptical about climate change. Who cares? That doesn't matter. You don't need people's opinions on facts. You might as well have a poll asking which number is bigger, 5 or 15. Do owls exist? Are there hats? Human activity is making the earth uninhabitable to humans. And if we don't want to die, then we have to wake up to these facts and change. So yes, Greta, change is coming. And though the change we have seen in recent years has been change in all the wrong direction, you may recall that I spoke out against the Paris Climate Accord years ago. But unlike Trump, I was not opposed to the goals of the Paris Climate Accord. I was opposed to it because it didn't go nearly far enough to save the planet. And any action that we propose that doesn't save the planet isn't worth talking about. We don't need to simply rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. We need to actually take the actions necessary to save human existence. So Greta, I do believe that change is coming, but it may come when members of your generation have been elected to lead governments. And the coronavirus may be doing that. The virus may be radicalizing your generation to run governments in a different way. So the change may not come until Donald Trump and Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and probably Roger Ray are all decomposing in some iteration of Memorial Garden somewhere, but change is coming. We can be sure of that because it has to, or humanity will poison itself out of existence. And remember, folks, those Easter narratives in the Gospels about resurrection, that's a metaphor. This life is all you've got. You will not be coming back. You've got to save your life by saving the planet's life. The Indian writer and environmental activist Andrutai Roy has pointed out that, she says, historically pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one's no different. It's a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. You can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us, or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. That's what I'm asking for you to lean forward and be ready to fight to save the planet. Trump is using this pandemic as a smokescreen behind which he is hiding moves to degrade the earth while plundering the public purse. And I'm reaching a point of almost accepting that. You know, it's like, can you really blame a scorpion for stinging? That's what they do. So Trump being a criminal, I guess that's just what he does. But the pandemic which has put up a red stoplight all around the world, shutting down most travel, tourism, and retail business, is actually allowing the earth to take a deep breath. For the first time in a century, you can actually see the fish in the canals of Venice. And Los Angeles, that has been infamous for air pollution for my entire life, right now, this Easter weekend, has some of the cleanest air of any major city in the world. We've only been in economic stay-at-home orders for a month, and the earth is already showing us that a miraculous resurrection is possible if we could just learn to behave ourselves. As our young friend Greta has observed, the coronavirus pandemic only shows that the world can act fast in a crisis. And folks, I hope you know, so far as the earth is concerned, we are in a crisis, and it calls for more than a metaphoric resurrection. It calls for a real one.
1, 2, 3, 4, show. It ain't what we don't know that gets us in trouble. It's what we know for sure that just ain't so. If our beliefs are too fragile for rebuttal, then maybe it's just time to let them go. If our beliefs can't stand rebuttal, maybe it's just time to let them go.
Let him go, let him go, let him go.
Vaccines ain't causing autism now, they have a different result. What happens to kids who get their shots, they get to grow into adults? How do you know for sure?
How do you know, how do you know?
What you know for sure?
How do you know, how do you know, how do you know?
How do you know for sure? What it is you know for sure, for sure. Climate change is being denied with the melting ice and flooding. What if it's all just a hoax? We create a better world for nothing. How do you know for sure?
How do you know, how do you know?
What you know for sure?
How do you know, how do you know, how do you know?
How do you know for sure? What it is you know for sure,
For
sure. Yeah, it ain't what we don't know that gets us in trouble. It's what we know for sure that just ain't so. If our beliefs are too fragile for rebuttal, you know, maybe it's just time to let them go. If our beliefs are too fragile, maybe it's just time to let them go. Let them go, let them go. You think different is evil, you'll always judge another. And only those who think like you'll be called your sisters and brothers. How do you know for sure? What you know for sure?
How do you know, how do you know, how do you know?
How do you know for sure? What it is you know for sure,
For sure.
The world ain't flat like a pancake, it's a beautiful blue ball. If you're worried about falling off, you might not go any place at all. How do you know for sure?
How do you know, how do you know?
What you know for sure?
How do you know, how do you know, how do you know?
How do we know for sure? What it is you know for sure, for sure. It ain't what we don't know that gets us in trouble. It's what we know for sure that just ain't so. If our beliefs are too fragile for rebuttal, you know, maybe it's just time to let them go. If our beliefs can't stand rebuttal, maybe it's just time to let them go.
Let him go, let him go, let him go.
If our beliefs can't stand rebuttal, maybe it's just time we let them go.
Friends, please stay safe. Do what you can to limit social contact. Don't go to the store more often than you have to, and go alone. Don't take your kids or your family. Treat one another with respect, and remember not to pass the virus around. It can't move on its own. It needs a person to move it. Don't be that person. But when you go, go in peace to love and to serve.